Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sold Sign Real Estate Unplugged. We are your favorite hosts and realtors, Lauren
and Naya.
and we are so happy that you decided to come back. If this is your first time, welcome. All right, let's get into the story of the week.
All right. So this writer says, when remote work became the norm, I finally felt like I had the freedom to live anywhere. So I decided to leave the city for a quieter life in the suburbs. I found a great house with a spacious yard and even had an extra room to use as a home office. It seemed perfect, especially with no daily commute to worry about. But then, after about a year, my company announced a hybrid work policy requiring us to come into the office 3 days a week. Suddenly, my perfect new setup didn't seem so ideal. The commute was long and exhausting, and I found myself missing the convenience and social life that I had in the city. After months of trying to make it work, I realized I had to move back closer to the office. Unfortunately, selling the house so soon after buying meant taking a financial hit, and I ended up spending more than if I just stayed put. This experience taught me that when it comes to where you live, flexibility at work is never guaranteed. I wish I had thought about that before my lifestyle, or had thought about how my lifestyle could change before making such a big move. I've been seeing a lot where people who have been working since 2020 are now required to go into the office 2 days, 3 days a week. And since then, people have moved anywhere. Their company might think they are living in one state, but they don't move 2 states across, bought a house, started a family. People have completely, their lives have changed and they've been they've done different things because of the flexibility of being able to work remotely. And yeah, when you get that email, subject line, oh, that hurts. Hybrid work or whatever they're gonna say, starting
what?
immediately. But no, yeah, that's a pretty, I'm sure that's a pretty big shock and shift to go back to a commute, to be living from, to be coming from wherever you're living now because you had the flexibility to be wherever. That's a tough one. And this person, yeah, they didn't live there long. So, right, you don't have a lot of equity in the home. You lived there for a year. So, at this point, that's a pretty hard situation to be in. So, I guess the first thing is that you really have to, as best as you can, figure out what all the stipulations are of your remote policy. For some people, they've been at companies that have always been remote. Yeah. So then you're pretty much good. But if you're at a company that wasn't remote, I think it should be expected that there is a risk that they may withdraw that, remote work flexibility. And you got to figure out, you're going to stay at that job, you're going to stay at that house, you're going to find something else. Yeah.
That's a big decision to make. Because, you don't want to leave your job, especially if you love your job. And it's no, I want to stay here. I'm good. But you also probably love your house too. But if you don't have a job, then you probably may or may not have a house anymore. So I guess that is a decision that one would have to think about. Do I stay where I am in this quieter, she moved out the city because, she wanted a quieter life and wanted to move into the suburbs, and she was able to get that. But now what do you do with your job? Do you leave it and find a new one? Or it looks like, she decided to sell. So if you don't know, we're in the DMV.
My life.
Yeah, a lot. Okay.
Sitting in this car.
And we have a lot of traffic out here. And, whether we're taking the train or we're in the car, the car is absolutely worse. It's horrific. Yeah. But being in the DMV with this traffic, it's you really do have to make a decision. And you don't have to be obviously in DC because it's very expensive. I don't know what city this person lives in, but, just to talk about our city, most people live on the outskirts of DC and or Baltimore, depending on, what part you're in, or, Virginia. And they commute. And it is about an hour each way. I think average is an hour each way. And that may be a lot for some people. And it's kind of normal here.
I mean, even in this area, I feel like I've heard stories of people like commuting an hour and a half or like 2 hours for a job, like just outside of before remote work and all that was a thing. But some people are down to do it, but it does impact your lifestyle, maybe your livelihood. Like you have to consider all those things. And so I think the next step, I guess the policy, they all have a fine line that probably says, this can change at any time. Yeah. So you can only, I guess, investigate that as far as you can. But, think about maybe when you're working remotely and you decide to purchase a house, if worst case scenario, I'm required to go back to the office, like, see what that commute is, whether you just keep putting it on your GPS to see what it looks like from your house, or if you I don't know, maybe actually test it out and drive it one day. But really see if what it looks like is something that you could live with in the event that you may have to commute. Because it's not going to be that easy to, I guess, get a new job or to figure out what to do with the house if you do have to make a decision on one or the other. Like there is no quick or easy answer. So at least maybe having some background of, am I okay with this drive if that becomes the case?
Yeah. And this person is, I mean, she's able to just go back into the city. It seemed like that's where her social life was. So, I don't know if she's single, dating, whatever, but she was able to just kind of, okay, I'm gonna go back into the city. It seems like probably a financial hit because she purchased the house. I wanted to, as you were talking, I was sitting here thinking about it in a different way too. Like, what if she left, and knowing she left the city because she wanted to be in the suburbs, and she's like, oh great, like I want to start a family, so I'm gonna go ahead and have a kid, right? So now it's like, hold up, you got this house, you think you're remote work, right? So you can have a baby, you can be home with the child, right? So you don't really need daycare, any of that. But once that shifts and now you are going into the office 3 days a week, now you need daycare. You have to try and you got to do your commute because now you have moved into the suburbs. So now you got to worry about that commute. Drop your kid off. Can you drop your kid off, be at work at a certain time, and be back to get your child? And now it's kind of like, that just messed you all up.
That just hearing that just stressed me out.
Right, that would just mess you up.
That is too much.
So you really have to think okay, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna move to a city, I'm gonna buy a house and everything that comes with it, or whatever you plan to do. You got to make sure that remote work is going to stay for as long as, hopefully, as long as possible. But a year is not enough. That's just not enough time. That's a shock, and that would piss me off. I ain't gonna lie, because I'm like, now what am I supposed to do? And it seemed like she could easily, I guess, just move right back to the city, and she's fine. But for people who had that mentality, and they're like, just rethink it and just be like, okay, let me just make sure before I do jump into buying a house, moving into the suburbs or into the city, wherever you're moving to or from. Just making sure that everything kind of lines up. And we know things come up, things happen, but it seems like for certain jobs and certain companies that remote work is not a permanent thing. And you got to figure out how long the temporary remote work is going to last. So, and then maybe starting off renting so that you don't get a financial hit, you don't get hit hard. That way you can kind of build up to it. So if you are moving to a completely different city, if your job is in New York and you're like, you know what, I don't want to be in the cold, I'm gonna go ahead and move to Cali. Go ahead and rent, okay? Don't just go out and buy a house because you don't know how long you can actually be remote. And now they're calling and saying you got to come in 3 days a week. You think you gonna come in 3 days a week from Cali to New York? No. So you should just go ahead, maybe rent for a year. And we tell, some people will come in from out of state, and they will want to rent because they want to just get used to the area. They don't know what their job's going to do. And it's nice that you can rent for a good 6 months to a year, and then you go ahead and buy, knowing what your job is going to do.
Yeah. And I think, like, just in general, you're not always going to know, of course, everything, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, things are going to come up. The organization's going to change their mind. You might have a baby. All these things can just come up. But I guess the one thing that's, I don't know, a silver lining is that because you own the home, like, you still have, although this person, like, had only lived there for a year, so yeah, like, you didn't have the equity built up or anything like that, you always have an option, I guess, at the end of the day. So maybe you're able to, maybe if you have to move closer to the office and now you have to become a renter for some time, maybe you can keep your home that's further away and you rent it out.
That's a good idea.
And that can still that can save your home. It could be something that you can return to later after you take some time to maybe find a permanent remote job, or maybe something that's near your home. But, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, you have options because you are the homeowner. So yes, you can rent it or you can sell it and, maybe take a little bit of a loss because you didn't have time to build equity. But everything always, it's going to work out because you have an option.
Yeah, and you have a job.
And you have the job still.
So it'll work out.
It'll
Just
work
gotta, I
out.
guess, pick your battle. Like, do you want the commute? Are you okay with it? It's only 3 days a week. Maybe you can talk to your boss and be like, can I just do 2 days a week?
Right.
Yeah, and just like every other week or something. So you do have options, and maybe she didn't have to sell so quickly and make that decision. Maybe she could have just held on to it. Like you said, that was a great point. Like, hold on to it and just rent it out, and then you use that money to go rent out something else in the city.
Yeah,
you want.
Because, like, maybe sometimes you just need a little bit of time. So if you can find a renter, then maybe you can find a permanent remote job. And you go back to your house when that renter is done with their 1 year lease. But
that was a great point.
Yeah, I guess lots of things to think about as, times change, your needs change, or, your life changes, your priorities change. Everything can be changing, but, you have options. And if you are working remotely, just keep that in mind when you start your, home hunting journey. If, a commute would be something that you could do from your desired area, or if you maybe need to investigate further about what work and buying a home looks like for you. So,
yes, love that. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up our episode for this week. Again, guys, y'all can follow us, share, like, all the things. You will find us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and on all podcast platforms. You can watch us live, and you can also just listen to us in your car or wherever. We just want to thank you guys for coming back, and we hope you have a great week.